Welcome back, everyone. My name is John Uhler. This is Journey to Healing. We are in an extended series on the topic of boundaries under the umbrella category of grief and loss. And as I often say, why the two? Because if you have things that are unfinished, that are sort of being drug into the current day, you will find it very difficult to be fully emotionally present in the moment to bring the right amount of energy, right amount of response to the moment that's appropriate to the moment, that's applicable, especially if you're dealing with people that may or may not be the best to be around. And hopefully by the end of the program, you're going to have a sense of who you should or shouldn't be around this Christmas. So we're going to be looking at that. I invite you to go to SurvivorSupport.net under podcasts. Bring yourself up to where we are now. We're going to be jumping into actually where we left off last time, which was looking at who are some of the people that are okay to be around. We have looked at, and we will continue to look at, people that are actually emotionally pretty dangerous for you to be around because the outcome will be predictable. One of our key principles that we have built upon is found in the New Testament in Matthew chapter 7, verse 6, where Jesus says, "Do not cast your pearls before swine." Think of an audience, a Jewish audience, and he said somebody in that audience has some pigs. Well, that wouldn't go over well, meaning people would be looking around asking, who has pigs? He also added dogs. He said, do not take what is special. Some versions say what is holy, but what does that mean? It means to set apart, to be separate. We reference good china. So the things that are most special, we should not be giving to just anybody. And how applicable is that? That's everything from emotional to sexual. So the physical realm to just everything about us. So we have to ensure that the people that we have in our lives are those that are not going to take advantage of us. So Jesus referenced those outside of the home. He called those dogs. That also comes out of the book of Proverbs, where it says, as a dog returns to its vomit, kind of crass, kind of graphic, so a fool repeats his folly or returns right back to that. We've seen that the term fool 3,000 years ago, used in the book of Proverbs and Psalms, quite frankly, reference somebody who is beyond the point of ever really wanting to come back. They have unleashed their ego. They have doubled down on violating their conscience, and they've gotten to a point where they are really comfortable being who they are, and they actually want to be more of who they are. And so they have no compelling reason to begin to become thoughtful towards you. And they're not going to dial it back. So think of someone, if you're anticipating some anxiety over the holidays, the question is why? Probably you are anticipating being around some people that are pigs and dogs and fools. Now, I don't recommend you walk up to them and say that, but that is for you to know. But in order to know that, you have to be able to discern that. And what happens is when you start interacting with professional grade pigs, they are masters of manipulation and masters of causing you to turn your intuition down. We've covered that extensively. We will continue to cover that. But to really understand that, I recommend go back, watch some of the podcasts so that you can really understand where we're going now and some of the things that I've just said. A good podcast to go back and watch is the warthog assessment, playing upon the idea of pigs. A big pig, a wild pig, is a warthog. And so in that assessment, you'll see both an assessment about us, that's part one, and then part two will be an assessment for another person. And you will be, so we first have to take out the log in our own eyes so we can see the forest. No, it says so we can see the speck. But when we're dealing with pigs, they don't have specks. They have complete forests going on in their eyes. They're okay with that. They're actually planning more. And they are telling you they're just fine. As a matter of fact, you have the issue. So it's very important to be able to discern who it is we're dealing with, because the more self-entitled someone becomes, the more selfish someone becomes, self-entitlement stemming from selfishness, and the smarter they are, the more sophisticated they are, you're going to have a very difficult time being able to discuss with them and find, take things at face value. They are masters of deception, and they'll tie you up in knots. Have you ever found yourself frustrated when you walk away from an exchange with somebody that is more than a one-time exchange? Somebody in your family, let's say, that just drives you crazy. So the question is, how long has that been going on? And why? A couple of programs ago, we looked at a clip of Jane Fonda where she described her interaction with her father, Henry Fonda, as they played father-daughter in the movie On Golden Pond. And it was interesting in that clip, there's a key part where she's describing what was going on the set. And she described a certain kind of interaction that happened between her father, who was playing her father. And she said, when he said a certain thing, a part of her died. Well, how can that be? Because she was probably in her 40s by the time she was making that film. What was it that was so dramatic? Why did it shock her so much? Because she was still hoping against hope that something might be different. Well, she was living out an illusion. She was kidding herself. But she's bright. She's very typical of what goes on. And when I see my clients in session, oftentimes there's a certain key relationship that they may not even know that it needs to be explored, that hasn't been resolved. And so they come into session, they come in depressed, they come in anxious, they may be experiencing panic attacks, they may be experiencing emotional eating, some kind of compulsive behavior, and they're not aware of the fact that really what's going on is they have been stuffing stuff. And they haven't connected the dots. They haven't discovered that issues of truth are trying to come to the surface, and the issues of truth may very well have to do with relationships in their lives, and some of the most key relationships. When I was working in the prison system in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections on psychology staff, I was surprised how many men were in prison due to domestic violence, but in that case, it wasn't against their spouse, but there's plenty of those. It was against their parent or a brother or a sibling. They had, and oftentimes it's over either the holidays, meaning as far as what time of year. It was some family gathering, oftentimes the holidays. And the question is, why didn't they see that coming? And oftentimes they were playing mind games with themselves. It had been years in the making. It had been building. They were trying to convince themselves that it was going to be different this year, but they hadn't done anything different. There hadn't been any discussions throughout the year with that potential person. Now you mix alcohol, almost inevitably there's alcohol, and now you have a very toxic cocktail, pardon the pun. You have a powder keg, and what happens? It's not so much of a very Merry Christmas, and somebody ends up doing 2 to 5 years or even much longer, depending upon what happens. And as I would interact with those men, I would begin to ask them what happened and to walk back through the years. Like, did that suddenly come about? They believe it did. But as I would begin to ask, well, what were previous Christmases like? Well, yeah, we used to kind of get into it. And so you could see it was building. And they were actually putting themselves in a very dangerous position because they were in denial. And that is a time that term, and for those of you familiar with the 12 steps or AA or NA, they'll say, denial is more than a river in Egypt. And that's true. So we do not want to be in denial. We want to be fully in touch with what is going on. So we need to have discernment. So we've been making the case and building the case for people beginning to understand what a healthy relationship looks like. We have talked about in the past, we're going to bring it up again now, what a reasonable or a healthy relationship looks like. It looks like two people carrying their own load. And we described what a load is. That comes out of the book of Galatians, but it's really a Greek term. It simply means a little knapsack. And what is in that knapsack that we are supposed to carry? It is doing what is right, just, and fair. So you will have a healthy relationship if you are with someone who is doing what is right, just, and fair, meaning they'll never presume. And that is very different, again, than what we spoke of being a burden, meaning having a burden. So there are things that we are supposed to carry, and what is that? We are supposed to carry our load, but we are not to carry by ourselves a burden. A burden is something that we have no responsibility for bringing it upon ourselves. We live in a fallen world, or things happen to those that we care about. Now that's laid upon us, and we actually need somebody to come alongside of us. In life, we want to have relationships that are heading upward. We talked about having healthy relationships where both partners, remain on the straight and narrow. And they do not offload their load. You notice they still have their knapsacks on. Okay, so they are both doing what is right, just, and fair, but somebody's getting a little tired. And so now we are helping one another, but we're moving upward. We talked about what happens, though, if we get off the path. The two things that'll pull us off the path are ego and anxiety. And what happens when we get off the path? Well, we actually end up going downward. So we've described this. Why are the numbers upside down? Because the numbers represent, the numbers are upside down in that one. But we talked about how we need to stay, let me bring it up again. We need to stay out of the fog. And so in a valley, there is fog. Let me bring that one up again. And selfish people will take us for a ride down into the fog, and what happens in the fog, we begin to lose perspective because they have other interests in mind. They have selfish interests, and they're trying to cause us to deny or minimize our intuition. So we start going downward, and ultimately what's going to happen is we're going to be left carrying the load. Their load, quite frankly, and then if we continue, we will end up carrying everybody's load. And what does that look like? Well, we talked about this a few programs ago. If I don't have discernment, there's plenty of people that are more than happy to put their stuff on us. So we have to make sure that we do not end up in ultimately toxic relationships. And then we talked about predatory relationships, because that'll take us down into eventually the zone of being rolling in the mud with a pig, and nothing good is going to come from that. The only thing that's going to come from that, and I'm really summarizing the past 5 or 6 programs, by the way, podcasts, so I recommend you go back to SurvivorSupport.net under podcast to bring yourself up to where we are. But that is the source of the vast majority of stress that we deal with. It is taking on responsibility that is not ours, and that is not love. Why would I do that? Ultimately, because of fear. I am fearful of speaking the truth. And so I have to make sure that my relationships are based in truth. So Jesus comes along and says, you need discernment. Solomon certainly talked about discernment. Paul talks about discernment. Peter talks about discernment in 2 Peter chapter 2. The last verse, he references the same word picture, dogs and pigs. And so for thousands of years, very wise people, Jesus being the wisest. Why? Well, he's God in a body, and he's as we know, he's God with us. So God himself has said, do not deal with pigs. So I have to be able to discern that. Last time, I wanted to kind of regroup and to help people understand the difference between a pig and who is not a pig. You can go back and access the podcast, How Big of a Pig. That'll help you, again, discern, kind of get a sense for that, but I thought at this point it would be helpful. So last podcast, we were looking at what are some of the categories of people that are not pigs, meaning that it's okay to deal with. Now, why is that okay to deal with? Because I'm just going to randomly bring up one of the other pictures. Sorry, there's our stress. Okay, so as we have moved downward, so the best way to view relationships is not an either-or proposition, meaning either we're friends or we're not, but to view it on a continuum, a scale 1 to 10. But more than just a 1 to 10, sorry about that, we're going to bring that back up, and I'm going to try to get my little picture small here. There we are. Okay, so go back to previous podcasts and you'll see, I know I've covered up some words here, but there's a progression. We want relationships that are healthy and moving upward. But if we have somebody in our lives that start to evidence selfishness, start to evidence issues that are not healthy, do we abandon them right away? Do we kick them to the curb? Absolutely not. Or if we meet someone who has some rough edges, do we snub them and kick them to the curb? No, we don't. What we're going to do is we're going to begin to try to help them become better people. But that takes discernment, because you may actually be dealing with someone that is very reprobate. And we talked about what that term means. That means a mind that is no longer useful for valuing what God values, especially in terms of morals and ethics, how we treat other people. So you could be dealing with a narcissist, a sociopath, or a white-collar psychopath, or worse, who's a wolf in sheep's clothing, who looks great. You could be dealing with a cult leader, right? So a used car salesman, sorry for those of you that sell cars. That's an actual psychological profile, by the way, a used car salesman. So those are people that have hearts and characters and dispositions that are way down in the minus numbers, but they want to appear good. They want to appear decent. But what happens is they have designs on you and your stuff and everything about you. They're going to start using you. So we need to be able to spot where this is going before it goes too far. So if we're with somebody and suddenly they start to change a little bit, they start to have some difficulties, or we meet them and they already have difficulties, but the most dangerous kind is the ones that start out good, that seem reasonable. This can be a dating relationship. And before you know it, we start to have their stuff being dumped on us little by little. And before you know it, it starts to get worse and worse. We talked about the twisting process. Let me see if I can find that one. I'm going to bring that up again. There we go. So there's a twisting zone. So if you get below 3.5, certainly into the 4, and it's subjective. If you don't like my numbers, come up with your own, but you need to understand there's a slippery slope and the snowball begins to build. Once somebody enters into the twisting zone, meaning the other person, they become different. You start hardening your heart, you start violating your conscience, you will find it easier to violate your conscience more and more, and it will change you from the inside out. You will become a different person that you don't even recognize, and eventually you're okay not recognizing that person because you'll think that former you is a putz. And you're okay then having that kind of relationship, doing that to other people. So as you can see, he's got his little smile on my face, or his face, not my face. There we go. You'll be okay doing that to other people. And that's never okay. So as we are interacting with people, we need to, let me bring my picture back up here. We need to be able to discern who it is that we're dealing with. Okay, so again, do we immediately kick somebody to the curb? Do we immediately have hard and fast boundaries? No, boundaries will match the water level. That's why we need to discern. So if somebody starts to change toward the negative, we start to adjust boundaries. It starts with speaking the truth in love. We need to be able to speak. And that's why if I'm around someone that is taxing me, if I'm around somebody that is negatively impacting me, the question is, why am I still around them? And what am I doing about it? Am I addressing it? Am I speaking up? After I speak up, I have dispelled all doubt. And now I at least know this person is starting to get into a habit of doing this kind of stuff. Now they may have some rough edges, and guess what? I have to have some difficult conversations with them, as iron sharpens iron, so Proverbs says. And eventually, if that's not going to do it, then I need a little bit of more truth than grace. So we're transitioning into a less gracious, more truthful relationship. In fact, that sometimes is going to be more stick than carrot. And so I'm going to have to spur one another on to love and good works. So I need to be able to discern and match my level of boundaries with where that person is at. So again, we're looking at how to protect ourselves from those pigs, because we shouldn't be around them. But what is a pig versus what is not a pig? Because it's not just that it's either or, somebody's decent or they become a pig. That's not the case. So we want to still have grace while we're discerning. And so we talked about last time the first category of people, as they are descending into the negative, is what's called a prodigal. A prodigal is a person who has kind of gone off on their own, doing their own thing, but they're not hurting anyone. So they have ethics, but they're messing their lives up with their choices. They're hanging around with the wrong kind of crowd, and before you know it, they're open to being used, and pretty soon they hit bottom. Why do they hit bottom? Because they have ethics, and they're not going to go beyond a certain level, meaning they're not going to get to a point where they take advantage of someone else. And so a prodigal will be immoral oftentimes, but will not be unethical. So by the time the prodigal comes home, we showed that last time, the last podcast, there will be genuine repentance. Repentance means to do a U-turn. They're coming back in humility and brokenness. And you notice in the clip that we showed last time, as Jesus talked about that parable, he gave that story, the prodigal son was absolutely broken. Can you imagine if, as he was coming back down the road, he's coming home, he sees his father's thrilled, he's running towards his son, and the son says, "Hey, Dad, what's up?" And that's it. What do you think the father would do? Whoa. The father would slow down a little bit. Would it have the same outcome? No. The reason that story reads as it does is because the son was broken. He was humble. Remember, he said, hopefully my father will hire me as to be one of his servants. He was not presumptuous whatsoever. So the kind of person you want to deal with in terms of grace is someone that is humble, that is broken, that does not justify and rationalize his behavior and what he's done. So a prodigal is ethical. They do not presume, and they are broken, and they won't keep going back to the pig pen, by the way. Now, does that mean somebody won't continue to have issues? No, but there will still be a sense of humility. So we dealt with the prodigal. Prodigal is someone that needs grace, but he's in the negative by virtue of his choices and decisions. The next person we looked at were the difficult people, the people with faults and quirks and rough edges. Let me get the 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 24, Paul says to Timothy, he's writing a letter, "Be patient with difficult people." Now, what does that mean? Patience means having a long fuse, quite frankly, having the ability to hang in there with someone. So we do need patience. We're extending them grace. This is someone that's starting to frustrate us. This is someone that's starting to put their knapsack on us. Now, do we take their knapsack off and whack them with it? No. We're going to absorb it for a time so we can begin to try to figure out what's going on, but we need to give it back to them because they've given us their responsibility. We need to give that back to them, but we're also looking, where do they have burdens? But ultimately, the -1 category is someone that's starting to give their responsibility over to someone. Well, we're going to be patient. We're not going to be hard-nosed about it, but we're not going to not talk about it. Okay, but this is someone who is inclined to have some rough edges, and we need to work with them a little bit. But it's important to know that patience is not unlimited. Now, how long should we have patience with someone? I don't know. This is where discernment comes in. We do know this. You don't keep dealing with someone forever. So this is where we need wisdom to know who am I dealing with and what are they about. We don't want to be black or white in terms of we don't want to whack and hack relationships, but we're not going to continue on ad infinitum, ad nauseum, to where now we move from patience to really we're rescuing and enabling. Because we are never called to allow someone to stay at a low level of character. We're called to help one another, but we're not called to help facilitate someone who's, hell-bent, so to speak, to stay as they are. Okay, patience is not undiscerning. So while I have patience, I am looking to see how do they need to grow and how can I help facilitate that. And patience does not mean turning a blind eye. Okay, patience does give the person the benefit of the doubt that the person has the potential to grow and does want to grow, but is wounded. With enough time, the difficult person will respond in one way or another, either to us or if I have to have some additional boundaries, God can work with that person. Or they're going to get worse and prove that they were more than just a difficult person. They're going to prove that they are probably a pig. So we're going to have a varying degree of boundaries. And difficult people, and this is what's crucial, this is what separates the difficult people from pigs, that difficult people are actually wounded. And this is the time, really the only time, that I will agree that hurt people. But we're not to permit ad infinitum somebody just walking around and hurting someone. Now, we showed last time, and we will play it again, and then we will play additional clips. We're going to look at what are some of the categories of difficult people. Well, the first category, most people are going to be familiar with this clip. We played it last time. Within each of the difficult people, in one way or another, they want to be left alone. They don't have any pretense. In one way or another, they're trying to push people away. And listen to this famous character that we're probably familiar with.
Oscar.
Wait a minute.
I want to borrow your lid. It's a round lid.
Hey, you know what you're doing? You're letting in all the fresh air and sunshine. Boy, can a guy get a little rest around here? How'd you like me to snatch the roof off your house? Boy, I don't know all these...
Say, Oscar, have you seen Gordon?
You know something? That's 2 times in 2 minutes someone has pulled the lid off my trash can. You know something? One of these days, I'm gonna move out of your trash.
Oh,
then you're gonna be sorry. Boy, wait till I move out. You'll miss me, boy.
Okay, Oscar, I'm sorry.
Oh, Grouchy.
Who is kicking my can?
Oh, hi, Grouchy. And this is Grouchy. I wanted to play a game, but everybody's
Play a game?
busy. Could you play a game with me?
You kick my can and bother me
Would you-
and expect me to play a game with... I don't play games with little furry monsters and...
Grouchy, would you please, with Sugar, would you play a game with me, please? Please?
Boy. Wait a
Oh.
minute. I just got an idea here. I'm gonna play a little game with him that will make him never want to play with me again. Sonny,
No one wants to play a game.
yeah, I'll play a game with you here.
No.
Yeah.
You would play a game with
Yeah, I'm
Clover?
gonna play sounds for you.
Oh, boy, tell me what the game is.
Okay, I just said I'm gonna play sounds for
Play
you.
sounds for me, yes.
Yeah, and you tell me what it's a sound of.
And I tell you what it is the sound of, and then what?
Yeah.
Then what?
Then you guess.
Yeah?
And if you guess right, you
Yeah.
you win.
Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. Okay, I'm ready. I'm going to concentrate. You go ahead.
I'm gonna play the most horrible, yucky, terrible sounds that will hurt his ears, and he'll just go away and leave me alone forever.
Now, Oscar's gotten the reputation of being what? Oscar the Grouch. But the question is, do we see Oscar walking around all over the place, trespassing all over the place, spreading his garbage, that's pretty good, spreading his stuff, his garbage, all over people's lawns. No, what happens is he just wants to be left alone. Now, he's got rough edges, but it's important to know that truly difficult people, that people that fit into the category of difficult people, so genuinely difficult people, they're not going to be offensive in terms of looking for issues. They're not going to be manipulating other people. Oscar really simply wants to be left alone. And if we could look into Oscar's background, what do you think we would find? We would probably find some hurt. So in Oscar's case, okay, he says he's going to do what to Grover, but he didn't start it. And he really just wants to be left alone. So we might say that, yep, he's a grouch. But ultimately, why? Because he's wounded on the inside.
Makes me happy when you do. I said I love you, and that's forever. And this I promise from the heart. We couldn't love you any better.
This is the mussiest thing I've ever heard.
The way you are.
What are you doing? What's this? What? Hey! Never hug a grouch. You're kissing me. Never do that to a grouch. Oh, you really know how to hurt a grouch.
Enjoy your piano.
Have fun.
You don't have to give me the piano. I don't want it. I heard this piano. It's tuned. Grouches hate love songs. Except this one kind of really made me angry.
You, as Oscar the Grouch, one of the interesting things, Carol Lynn actually suggested that in today's environment, Oscar wouldn't actually be approved as a character.
I think they might worry about whether it's suitable for children. I used to question that in the early days of Sesame Street. Why is Oscar on? He's such an unpleasant and even seemingly rude character sometimes. Well, they said, well, one of the producers said, well, I think it takes all kinds and to make a world, and so he's just another one, another kind. But I made sure that I didn't want him to be really mean. I didn't like it if he looked very mean, because I've have some examples, but I won't go into them now, of why some people who have been very grouchy, but yet when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, they actually help people.
So discernment then would help us know that, okay, we may not want to keep banging on his door, but maybe we could begin to show him kindness in such a way that it could start to take off the rough edges. And if you've watched any additional clips of Oscar at times, he has his mother come visit, he has his brother come visit, and he actually gets excited. He actually makes his place look nice. Well, that's not a total grouch. Well, he just has some rough edges. Why? Because he's probably been hurt. And we will continue looking at what are some of the other types of wounded people that come across as difficult people that we can extend grace to, that are reasonable to be around if we have to be around them over the holidays. Within that category, it is okay, but we still need to have boundaries, but we need to have wisdom. But again, they're not pigs, they're just difficult people. We will look at additional categories of those kind of people on the other side of the break.
Are you or someone you know a survivor of abuse and wondering where to turn for trustworthy help and insight into the effects of such abuse? Ever wish you had access to a resource that could help you continue your progress in healing? SurvivorSupport.net is that resource. Developed by Jon Uhler, a seasoned therapist with years of experience working with sexual abuse survivors, SurvivorSupport.net is a one-of-a-kind resource to help you understand the impact of abuse and to help you understand the nature of those who harmed you in order to help you gain clarity and continue healing. If you are interested in speaking with Jon Uhler about your situation or in having Jon conduct a consultation or a training for your church or organization, SurvivorSupport.net serves as a convenient method of contacting him. Our program, Journey to Healing, is made possible through the generous donations of viewers like you. There are many opportunities and needs that Survivor Support is attempting to meet, and your monthly support or one-time gift would be extremely helpful as we seek to meet those needs and opportunities. Simply visit SurvivorSupport.net and you will see the link to donate on the homepage. We thank you.